Début de l'enregistrement.
I heard a French translation, so I'm wondering if something needs to be reset or something.
Est-ce que quelque chose a besoin d'être réorganisé en français?
All right. Anybody else having that issue? Okay, good. Yeah, you're having it too because you were on English. Can someone double check the interpretation settings?
Est-ce que le français est entendu? Catherine, tu m'entends?
Make sure the assignments are right.
Catherine, tu m'entends?
Français?
Tu nous en... Marie-Françoise, tu m'entends? Marie-Françoise, tu
Maybe
m'entends?
reassign the interpreters.
It looks like I'm not being heard in French.
I'm restarting it.
Just one moment for our technology.
Marie-Françoise t'entend.
Okay, I think we're all good now. All right. Hi, everyone. Today is March 1st, 2025. Welcome. I'm Jeffrey Morgan, and this is a talk I host twice a week to discuss my experiences on the path of soul transcendence. This offering is brought to you by the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness with the encouragement and support of John Morton, who holds the mystical traveler consciousness, the spiritual consciousness that allows us to do the work that we're doing here today. If you're new to the call, the format is simple. We're going to start by calling ourselves forward into the light, which is calling our awareness forward into the light of God that's already present. And then we're going to chant three Anai hues. Hue is an ancient name for God, and Anai invokes a quality of empathy and compassion. And then I'm going to play a video clip from my teacher, John Roger. And then I'm going to read a poem by William Morris called Love is Enough. And then we can talk about whatever you would like. And one fun note is since we're having technical difficulties, the energy is probably going to be really strong today, so buckle up. That's usually what happens anyway. All right. Beloved Father, Mother God, Lord of all creation, and Lord of all technology, we call ourselves forward into your most precious love, light, and sound. And we ask for the light of the Holy Spirit and the light of the Christ to fill, surround, and protect this session, everyone here, myself, so that only that which is for the highest good will take place. We open ourselves to receive at this time of a direct experience of the presence of the mystical traveler in Christ consciousnesses, for the energy and presence of John Roger to infuse all that we're doing. We ask for this light that we are, this loving that we are, to fill every level, layer, and aspect of our being. We feel that presence of the Holy Spirit enveloping us, holding us, embracing us, that beloved reaching out from the depths of our being. And we feel that loving pervading our presence, our consciousness, all that we see, all that we hear, all that we touch, that we may be conduits and commutators of this divine light. And we allow this light to extend from our hearts into the hearts of all beings on this planet. And we see this loving vibration like a peace that surpasses understanding, surrounding the planet in a purple and golden light. And we ask that all beings anywhere in all of creation at this moment be filled with joy and peace. And we're grateful, Father, to be with you, to be together in satsang, in the remembrance of who we truly are. And we know, even as we witness the unfolding of our lives, that the blessings already are, and that you walk with us through each step, holding us through each step. And above all, we know that your will is done. And for this, we give our thanks, Berush Beshan.
So it's important that we have people around us know the intent of our being. People ask me, what is yours? I communicate living love. That's where I'm going all the time. Do you do it 100% all the time? No. But I'm in the percentages. I'm in there working it. And sometimes when I'm thinking, well, I don't think there's that much loving today, I have to ask myself the stupid question, what, JR, do you think happened that there's not as much love as there was yesterday? I go, I don't know. Why? There's no need to lie to yourself. That's the person you better be telling the truth to, because in the place where your spirit and your ego personality meets is where divine energy comes into the consciousness and where we learn to start to stand up inside. But if you come in with the ego personality, you'll stand up to avoid a space, V-O-I-D, to a void space, and then try to make something from that, and there won't be anything to make because it's not there.
All right. Love is Enough by William Morris. Love is enough, though the world be a waning, and the woods have no voice but the voice of complaining. Though the sky be too dark for dim eyes to discover, the gold cups and daisies fair blooming thereunder. Though the hills be held shadows and the sea a dark wonder, and this day draw a veil over all deeds passed over. Yet their hands shall not tremble, their feet shall not falter. The void shall not weary, the fear shall not alter these lips and these eyes of the loved and the lover. All right. Richard and Lelania. It's just Richard.
Hello, hello. Well, somebody else is here too. One thing that I absolutely love about MSIA is how the energy of what we do runs through so many different lines of what's now considered religions, but was great spiritual masters. It's not just Islam or Christianity or Buddhism. I love that. And I also am wondering if you can talk about Christ and the Christed energy, since a lot of, as you know, when we use words on this level, people don't know if we're talking about the Christ of that people were killing for the Crusades, or the fundamentalist Christ, where you have to follow that to get to heaven. I'd like to hear you talk about when we talk about Christ, what that is, and anything else around how this line runs through Sufi, Buddhist, all the lines.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to be aware of, and I hear an echo on your side. Maybe I'll mute you, and then and then I won't hear it. So the first thing to be aware of, I think, is from the perspective of this level, they don't really necessarily look tremendously different, the Christ and the mystical traveler consciousness. And indeed, in certain cases, they were embodied with the same or anchored through the same person, like in the case of Jesus Christ, anchoring both the traveler and the Christ consciousness. For me, the main difference is the traveler is a consciousness that pervades all existence. It is a commutator by which God's light is communicated and expressed, including the sound of God and the light of God, into all creation and into all existence. That's why the traveler runs through all of it. So you could say the traveler is as present in the line of the negative power, what we call the world, as it is in the line of the Christ. It's just ubiquitous, omnipresent, and it is a larger field of energy within which soul travel can exist, and that perception and that connection to remembrance can occur. So it's a consciousness that has a very specific purpose of remembrance and reconnection and movement of, and again, I'm trying to use words that aren't, because you asked me to use my words, and I could have just read for you out of Fulfilling Your Spiritual Promise. It'd probably be a better explanation, but I'm going to use my words just because I think it's good for me to be uncomfortable sometimes. The traveler consciousness, as I experience it, is itself God's remembrance or God's awakening, and it's the process by which the energy flows between the levels in a sense. So you could say a telephone between realms. And in a sense, the sound current is a telephone line by which we would communicate directly with an authentic manifestation of God. And I have trouble separating the mystical traveler consciousness and the sound current of God. They seem to be one, except that there's something that becomes very personal about the experience of the inner master, which is the mystical traveler as it manifests inside of us as a guide through the various levels of God's creation and back into source. In order see, the thing is, the traveler doesn't take a side because it's the means by which all of this works. So even Kal Niranjan, in structuring the lower creation and building those lower forms in the evolutionary process through the Luciferian plan, set things up using that consciousness as a means of actually enabling the action. So the traveler is not opposed to anything there. It's a bigger, more encompassing function or consciousness that pervades everything all the time. It's happening in everything all the time. The Christ action uh, was a different pattern of well, there's a wonderful moment of peace, Christ, my man for eternity, that's worth watching. Somebody can post the link. But the Christ action, to a large extent, as I perceive it, is an action very particularly for the souls of this planet, because there was an action that was put in place under the firstborn son, son of the morning, Lucifer, that had people in a cycle of transmigration. And if you read books like the Anurag Sagar, which you could call it like the Indian Gnostic Gospel, it's very much tracks to the secret Gospel of St. John, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary. There's a bunch of these Gnostic Gospels that talk about a lower creation and talk about an authentic God form, and that authentic God form sending itself manifested spirit directly into flesh as Jesus to then give people a way out of the lower creation. But essentially, there was a plan in place of evolution, and it was largely deterministic. And the soul would be bound to pay every debt down to every last farthing. And the action would continuously have us reincarnating. And then what would happen is we were an experiment, and that experiment would fail in some context, and then another planet would be created where Lucifer would be acting as the Lord, or the Kal would be acting as the Lord. The the Quran talks about the creation of the Hadiths talk about this in creation, where Iblis, or like Lucifer, didn't want to bow down to humanity. And the idea was that humans, although a soul is made in the image of God, the soul is a direct reflection of God, or you could say the entire ocean of love and mercy in a drop, that thing. Lucifer felt, or Kal Niranjan, the Kal power, set it up so that we would relate to that form as God. And so we were unable to fully bridge into the soul realm unless we found a traveler, because people, there's always somebody who's anchoring the traveler consciousness, but we would have to pay devotion for thousands of years to someone like a Krishna to get us in there. Even though they couldn't get in there, they would get us in there. But it was like few and far between. And then there were a couple of souls that entered creation and then left in one lifetime. I think Moses might have been one of them. But point being, uh, it was set up for us to be trapped here so that we would prove, in a sense, we were not worthy, so that Lucifer, so that the Kal power could be the Lord that we worship. And indeed, in the Anurag Sagar, after exhaling the Vedas, because they say in the Hindu creation story, it's like the Vedas, the sounds of the Vedas actually created existence. So Sanskrit as a language was, in a sense, the molecular structure of existence. So Kal breathed out the structure of existence and then moved into the void so that nobody could take his darshan. And everybody would think that he was the formless Nirgun deity of all, like Godhead in a sense. So you see, there's so many tricks on the way that even if you did sadhana for thousands of years and you reach this high level, if you were looking at Kal Niranjan, you would think you were looking at God because the being is so magnificent. But it's not. It's not the final destination. That's why we say etc. So that system was set up, and there is an action of, because Christ really is I guess, a Romanized version of a Greek version of a Hebrew word, Mashiach. Now, there's a socio-political context of the meaning of Mashiach, which most Jews, if they're very devout and you talk to them about Jesus, they're going to basically say, well, he wasn't the Mashiach. Why? Because they had very specific criteria by which the Mashiach was supposed to exist, overthrow the foreign invaders, and restore the temple to purity. So there's very specific rules in that context. But largely, if you look at the scripture and if you look at the Essenes and if you look at the larger context around that time, they didn't really understand what he was or what he was doing. I mean, that's really why he got killed. It wasn't like, oh, he claimed to be the Son of God. There's not even a vernacular in Hebrew to understand that concept. That was some weird pagan foreign thing. Like try to say that in Aramaic, it won't make sense. There's no vernacular for God men. There's like idols and then there's real God, and that's it. So so it wasn't that, it was who they were trying to make him. They were trying to make him a political leader. They were trying to make him all these other things. But I don't get, and my experience is he didn't really come to do that. He came to put in a new pattern, a new creation pattern, a new system of accounting that would allow people to, through a process of learning, rather than earning down to the last farthing, but just by nature of their own becoming aware and remembering who they are, could return to their origin, could return to the soul realm. Now, there have been instances, in a sense, a traveler would work on that action in returning people to the soul realm as well. There's not a problem with either way of doing it. You can do the thousands of years of devotion and then get in that way. That's fine. There's not inherently one that's wrong, and a lot of people do choose the evolutionary path. And that's okay too. It's not, we think of things in very black and white terms. We think, oh, Lucifer must be evil. It's not so much that. It's almost like if all of creation is a body that's optimized for a specific evolutionary path, there are white blood cells in that body that attack foreign invaders. And this new plan is often treated as a foreign invader to that structure. Because Lucifer would say, oh, you're going to screw up my plan. And then JR said something like, well, the plan is screwed up. It is screwed up because getting people on this trap of this credit card debt system so that they can then worship a lower form. It deviates from the intention. It deviates from the intention of the issuance. So essentially, one other thing to keep in mind is the Christ is an office that can be held by different beings. So before Jesus, there would have been somebody else holding that office. We talk about even future beings holding that office, but it's a function of the Mashiach would be translated, it could be like the Redeemer or things of that nature. They also use terms like Son of Man. But the Christ action is very much about reactivating the remembrance of the soul as a direct extension of the Lord of the soul realm, as a direct extension of God, as a direct extension of spirit. And in a sense, I always had this image in my consciousness of what Jesus did as you always had to have an intermediary. Like if you go back to the time of Abraham, Abraham didn't make sacrifices. He went to Melchizedek to make sacrifices. So you always, in a sense, had to have a temple. You had to have an intermediary. You had to have physical action. You had to have even killing, sacrifice. What I see as Jesus's action is if you had to go to the local telephone booth, it's like we just got a cell phone in there. So we have a more direct line and we don't have to use a middle person or something like that. But the tricky part about it is, even if the slate was to a large extent wiped clean in a big, big action at the time of Jesus, we are still in the Kali Yuga and we are still susceptible to being tricked into choosing back into that lower action. So a lot of us, because we like extra credit, stayed around doing different stuff and making mistakes and all that kind of stuff. And the thing is that the credit card system's still here. And the Christ action is available when we choose it, but we have to choose it. That's why when John Roger would talk about we save ourselves, it's like we're not saved. There's a moment when we say, I want the truth more than my next breath. And I'm not satisfied for that thing that's glittery and gold and looks like God, but no, I'm going to keep going until I really can't go anymore. And then I'm going to keep trying to go even further. And that intention of I would like to experience an authentic manifestation of God. I want the truth that is transcendent. That becomes that primary activation that cannot be denied. And the Christ action gets activated in people through that. Now, a lot of people throw around the word Christ, and it's an interesting exercise to start to understand the lower forms that different churches actually worship when they say they're worshiping Christ. And this is not a criticism of other faiths. You just look at the energy. I mean, there are entire churches that are under Lucifer down here. Now, they claim to be under Christ. Now, the funny thing is then you have like churches that purport to be under Lucifer, like satanic churches or whatever, and they're just under playing games and imagination. And they're just playing make-believe and having a little game, and it looks really fun. Or people doing like Wicca. But I talked to somebody who said they were a witch, and they didn't have the energy of a witch. And I know what witches look like, and I know when they're really effective. And I was like, you should really pick a different religion. And they're like, are you against Wiccanism? And I was like, no, you're just terrible at it. You're not a good witch. I know good witches. Like, you're not one of them. Just pick something you're going to be good at. You know, it's not, I figure why set yourself up for failure, you know? But it's a very interesting process. I once watched a documentary about an evangelical preacher who was very, very loved and very kind man, very into civil rights, like a bunch of good stuff. And I got to the end of the documentary and something just felt funky about it. And it just came in like, oh, he's playing for the other team. And that doesn't mean they're wrong or bad. It's just understand where they're sourcing from and what the purpose of the action is. And the tricky part is people can look at our church and think, wow, you just look like an island of misfit toys, you know? And we just look like a bit of a mess, like a bunch of aging boomers and a bunch of kids trying to do different stuff and, you know, a bunch of non-joiners who are super rebellious and like what kind of we don't look the part. But that's the thing. There are hundreds of organizations that look the part, but they're worshiping the Lord of the causal level. Or they're worshiping Lucifer, or they're worshiping, or who's sourcing that energy? And it actually shocks me. Like when when I go into a religious institution and I actually feel like Jesus Christ energy, I go, whoa, that's nice. Like, wow, that's an exception to the rule. I like that. I was shocked. I went to this Orthodox bookstore and I felt it, and I was like, whoa, not as much traveler, but definitely got the Christ thing going on. And then I didn't know anything about Orthodox Christianity. And I started looking at these icons and it was just like, whoa, it was just like hit me. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. And I loved it. But it's everywhere. I mean, you can get that. The Christ can be present when it's present. The traveler is present when it's present. It won't make sense. I mean, the traveler has touched into organizations, as you mentioned, throughout history. It doesn't care. Doesn't care what country you're from. Can you hold the energy? That's and That's why it's like people argue with me about, oh, how come you guys don't allow weed in the movement of spiritual inner awareness? Hey man, we would if it worked. It doesn't work. You can't hold the energy if you do that. You know? It's no judgment. It's like getting angry that wax doesn't conduct electricity. Sorry. That's just not what wax is for. Why some physicist is going to be like, I have a special wax that conducts electricity. Haha. That's fine. You can post it in the chat. But point being, it's not personal. And the truth is, if we as an organization, for some reason, go off track energetically and don't become good conduits of it, it's going to find something else because it always has to. It always finds a way in because this process of awakening is part of the human story. It will happen. Now, that whole redemption and returning to the soul realm thing and bridging into the soul realm and then into the 27 levels is just like a thank you, John Roger. Thank you, Lord Jesus Christ. That's happening. That's amazing. And that is its own action that rode on the pattern of Jesus, rode on the pattern of John Roger. That's its own action that we get to benefit from. That's a bridge we get to cross because it was built. But the traveler has been doing the traveler's thing for since the beginning. There's never a time when that wasn't an action, when it wasn't a consciousness pervading all of it. Now, people who hold that traveler consciousness, they've been called saints, they've been called prophets, they've even been called philosophers, they've been called any number of things. But it's all about, do you have the juice? And it's weird. You can read a book, like you said, of Sufi poetry, just a smattering of all the different poets, and you can totally tell who had the juice. You just turn to a page and you read it. You could read the most beautiful thing in the world and like, oh, that's a really beautiful poem. Next. But then you read one that could be like 10 words by somebody who's really got it, and you go, what was that? What was that? I want more of that. It's about what works. I think us being a mess is part of our special sauce. I mean, if we were too curated, we'd probably get too in love with the physical form of it. But we're about the real deal here. For purposes of the work that we do, as you know, the Lord Jesus Christ is the head of our church. But the one who's actually doing the teaching or holding for the initiations is the one holding the mystical traveler. The two action, they're so complementary. It's like two halves of the same coin. It's like, we don't really need to distinguish it until you get up to a certain level. Then it's useful to be aware that they're just separate intentions, very complementary intentions, but distinct in some sense. It gets harder as well to distinguish between those different intentions as you get up into certain levels. And I don't think of it hierarchy. It's more like certain frequencies. You would start to see these different spiritual forms that come into manifestation and power creation, and you can't really tell the difference. I would call it almost like viscosity. Like you can tell that one is slightly more opaque than the other. It's hard to, it's different shade of alabaster, who knows? But you start to get into those levels, it becomes very hard to distinguish, and you kind of just you don't really care anymore. The question always comes back to, how am I blocking that flow to fully pervade my awareness? It's like when somebody says they don't see God, guess who turned? It's like, and so I'm always, when I'm working on my bad habits, working on all that stuff, it's always like, what are the levels of my consciousness that decided to turn away from the full manifestation of spirit? Um, yeah, so I guess that's sort of the Reader's Digest of the Christ, but you could also just read about it in Fulfilling Your Spiritual Promise. Maybe somebody can post a link to that. That's pretty good. Or the Anointed One packet has a really good explanation of the Christ. But I mean, I can't say that you're going to read it and understand it, because if you listen to like the first track of the Anointed One, you just, you know, you listen to it like I've listened to it like, at a clip. I'll listen to it like 3 or 4 times to try and make sense of it, and you can't really totally make sense of it. There's a great mystery to it. And then you always end up coming back to what's my experience and what works. I mean, I had a lot of intellectual difficulty with the stories of Jesus, the context of Jesus, for all the reasons I mentioned before. It just seemed anachronistic and historically dubious and the whole thing, until I had an experience directly with Jesus, and then I just shut up, because I can have all the books in the world and I can have all the arguments in the world, but that kind of experience, you just go, well, I guess that's how it works. I mean, it's like, that's the thing. It's like, for those of us who are always thirsty for the amrit, like the ambrosia of authentic spirit, when we get it, we just shut up. It's like when that spirit comes in, you go, okay, yes, okay, whatever you just said, okay, you know, and it won't always make sense in terms of the historical context and everything else. I also read this book, Jesus, Son of Man by Khalil Gibran. That was a really big one for me in terms of relating to the Christ consciousness in Jesus. Um, but there's a ton of amazing books out there, of people. I think there's one that's really big also, if you're interested in. It's out of print, but I think you can get it a couple places. This one's pretty good.
I have that on my bookshelf.
Oh yeah, right on. Yeah, that's a good one. Anyway, for the rest of the folks. Anyway, I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what I got.
Well, you did okay. You did okay, Jeff. I do have another question, but I know there are others lined up. But it has to do with the office of the Christ. Let's say someone like Moses held that. What was the purpose?
Someone like Moses held that. I'm going to disregard that part and just answer the office part.
Okay, thank you. Basically, those that held the consciousness of the Christ before Jesus did the action of bridging.
Yeah, so we've heard, in a sense, it's a relational term. So if you say the Christ of something, like Buddha was the Christ of Asia, it's a redeemer. It's one that opens the door. It's one that opens the way. And then one that holds the bridge open. So to me, I look at the office as the one who's holding that bridge open. Now, you can read Fulfilling Your Spiritual Promise and prove me wrong. That's really okay with me. I'm I'm not going off of memory here, but my experience is it requires, just in the way that there needs to be a human anchor for the mystical traveler consciousness, which is in this case is John Morton, then if it's not held by a physical body for any reason or for a brief period of time, I believe it goes to a consciousness called Joel and then back into a physical body. But generally, it's in a physical body. My understanding is the Christ action needs to be held or anchored from a consciousness perspective, not from a body perspective, but from a consciousness that will hold that, like a Sanat Kumar, or like a Lord Maitreya, or like a something like that. But it would be a
Got it.
conscious, it wouldn't necessarily need to be like right now, is there a physical Christ? Well, actually, I've had very physical experiences with Jesus Christ, so I'm not really 100% sure that he's not physically around. That's a weird thing to say. It certainly weirds me out to say it, but it seems to be how it is working.
Grateful, grateful. Thank you, Jeffrey. That was, um, it really moved things inside of me and clarified questions that always come up. But the energy was wonderful. Thank you.
That's all that really counts. All right, thanks all. Um, there was someone asking a question at the end that was like at the end of the line, but I hadn't seen that person before. Do you want to ask your question first, just because I haven't heard you? I think, is it Nagar? Yeah.
Hi, hi Jeffrey. Um, so first of all, hi, and I want to thank you. I've been on your calls for a while, and I just want to say how grateful I am. So I was like kind of scared to share, but I'm going to because so my mom just got a diagnosis of cancer,
Okay.
whatever, stage 4B. It all happened really fast in the past like 3, 4 days. She's in the hospital right now. She just got surgery. And I'm just like, I'm really, really scared, I think. I'm having a lot of stuff come up, but the reason why I'm sharing this, I wanted to just really ask for light for her. Her name is Fakhri Nosrat. She's, she's just really beautiful. My intention is to try to be, to be as loving and supportive and all of that with her, but I'm really overwhelmed. Like I'm really, really overwhelmed. And my dad passed away. After that, it was really, really difficult. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but so um, so that, I guess I won't say anything. I love God. I love Jesus. I've had personal experiences with Jesus. I know, I grew up Muslim. Okay. So, and then
Well,
Jesus just,
Muslims like Jesus
yeah, they love Jesus, but in a different way.
in a different
I
way as a
know
prophet.
Jesus, like
Yeah.
I came into the light and he, like just the born again, like all that experience. And I know Jesus is with me, but I feel a little disconnected actually from God. Maybe this is my question because like Ramadan just started right now. Like when I say the things in Muslim, it really strikes a chord with me and I feel so connected with God, even though I don't know how to explain it to you. And maybe, and yeah. So I also want to share something else. Like 2, 3 years ago, I had this experience. I just like left my body. I went into this like light donut thing, and I was like, "Oh my God, thank God I'm leaving." I was like, "Okay, thank God I'm leaving Earth. Oh my God, God, I can't wait to like leave. I really didn't want to be here anymore." But
Yeah.
then I went there and I saw my dad, and he's like, "You have to go back, but God orchestrated this, and for you to just see this, and just you have to go back." Anyway, I'm just sharing this. And when I did come back, I got this job in this nonprofit and I'm helping refugees and all of that. So I feel like maybe that was part of my curriculum. Or maybe right now what's happening with my mom is I want to be as supportive as possible. But the truth is there's a part of me that's disassociated. Like I'm not really present here. And I just really need help to have my full presence here so I could support my mom and like be here. I'm not going to stop talking now.
No, no, no. You can ramble as much as you want. The I had a question. So how are you working with meditation in your life? Like, are you doing spiritual exercises like we talk about, or are you doing something else, or like, are you doing zikr, or like, what are you?
I've just been all over, to be honest with you, I don't have a discipline. That's the part of my brain that's like kind of became, I don't have like a set, it's like everything. I do anything that just, I don't have, but that's good. Zikr is great.
Yeah, zikr is really good.
Yeah.
So instead of saying who, which is the like who or Allahu, we say Hu, but it's kind of similar. It's a different frequency. I'll be honest. I love the who, but it's not. I would say Hue is a little bit higher frequency, but only because you can feel the difference. One's more elevating and the other's more earthing. But That
Can I?
aside,
Okay, can I share something? Like when I would hear Hugh at USM, because I
yeah,
went to USM for years and I love USM and that's,
yeah, 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 for sure.
but like that was my heart. I could feel it in every cell of my body, But when I do Hugh myself, I feel disassociated. Like I don't connect with it. If that
Yeah,
makes
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, the reason I'm suggesting that
yeah.
is the connection that you're looking for and that your body is and your emotions are creating the longing, the pain that you're suffering is because you're doing the whole like going out into the desert looking for water when you have a bubbling spring in your own backyard.
Okay.
So there's a way that we connect with people emotionally and associatively and call it on the mammalian level. And usually it's through like the heart chakra, which is beautiful, right? There's an interplay between the third eye center, the crown chakra, and the heart chakra that is very, very powerful. So I have nothing against that. But when we do just the emotional or the associative
Uh-huh.
connection
Uh-huh.
through belonging, which is what you're getting a lot of belonging from your parents and that sense of belonging, you go, how am I going to feel the belonging when they're not there? How am I going to, there's a part of you that freaks out because there's, in a sense, on the psychic genetic level, especially people in cultures as ancient as yours, will have a very, in a sense, tribal or familial consciousness. And for example, what I'll often see with people that I work with who come from these types of cultures is they will process their life through their family. So you have an experience and then you have to talk to your mother, who then talks to her sister, who then talks to your cousin, who then, and it reverberates through the family, and that's how you process things. Okay? Does that kind of fits a little? Okay, good. I'm gonna make
Yes.
you cry, like you're gonna cry a little bit, but that's just I'm just getting in there a little bit.
No,
So
I thank
just
you. I
go with it. Just
appreciate
go
it.
with it.
Thank
You'll be
you.
it'll be
Thank you.
fine. It'll be fine.
Thank
So
you.
okay. So part of what you're grieving is not knowing how to process the world in the absence of that group think. So that's number one.
Yeah, it's so true. Thank you.
Number two, um, you're not anchored in the essential level like in your awareness and the essential level that connects you to everyone, including them. So it's
Yeah.
like if you have a certain type of intimacy that triggers an emotional and basic self-comfort, like your little stomach right there, feels really comfortable and usually will involve like good food and talking and laughing and yelling and all that stuff. It is glorious. I love that. And that intimacy is nothing, literally nothing compared to the intimacy you will feel in God consciousness inside of you. So it's like they talk, if you want to talk, and I can go on and on about the Muslim line because I love Muhammad. I think he was such a beautiful consciousness. If you look into certain types of Sufism, like Naqshbandi Sufism, Jihad al-Nafs, and looking at the different levels of letting go of
Yeah.
association, you're in that process of deconstruction. It's very blessed. It's very beautiful. The way we would relate to this is if you could imagine that you're on in an easy chair, like the most comfortable chair ever, in a cave in your skull, and you're looking out your eyes, and you're comfy, and you're loving it, and you're suspended on a golden thread, and you just chant Hugh, and you feel yourself just sitting back in that comfiness. And then as you chant Hugh, the vibration of the thread, and you're already being pulled out as I'm saying that. So you can go with that. That's okay. You can just go with it. That's what the energy's there for, by the way. So the thread starts to vibrate as you start to go. It's like a beautiful string of the oud or something like that. And it starts to vibrate. And as it vibrates, you start to elevate. And you're in this extremely comfortable chair, the most comfortable chair, and you're behind your eyes and you're elevating. You feel yourself almost pulled back and up and out as you chant. And then as you start to elevate and chant, you start to feel yourself reaching up, like almost like that beautiful painting of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. And you're reaching out to touch the fingers of your beloved. You're reaching up and you can feel that beloved reaching back down toward you. You see, and you start to get more of an essential experience of connection. And that, as you chant, inhale, hue, like that, you start to connect into a part of you that is more essential than the associative mammalian pattern of the body. And you start to experience more connection than you've ever felt. We call it, it's the drop dissolves into the ocean of love and mercy. Right? Mevlana talked about it, right? All these different teachers throughout history talked about it. Al-Ghazali talked about it. Omar Khayyam talked about it. I could name, I mean, you want to go back even further. Rabia al-Basri talked about it. They all talked about this experience that is transcendent of the form. It comes down to, if you have that experience of what they call in the Muslim line, wadat al-wujud. Yeah?
Yes. Wahdat al-wujud. The oneness of being.
Yes, 100%. Or unity of being would be
Yes.
another way to say it. You wouldn't know how to miss a person if you tried. You wouldn't know the difference between you and your mother, you and your father. And the way you can support your mother and your father and the way you can support your mother through this is to know her on that level, to know her as transcendent of the conditions she finds herself in, the peculiarities of her karma. That is the greatest gift you can give another person, is to see them, truly.
Thank you. I mean, it's just resonating so much. And the greatest gift that you've gave me right now is to not disconnect from my tribe, or like that, because that's the part that I think was going like this. So I just feel so much more at peace with it. Like that's also
Yeah.
a part that's going to serve me to even, yeah.
Correct. I told you that because your body was in that consciousness. So your
Yeah.
body was in a freak out because you were losing your tribe. So you now know how to calm your body. And then you bring your attention to the third eye center and you ride that up into that consciousness of Wadat al-Wujud.
Okay.
That will assist you in feeling, it's like God, Muhammad said, God is closer to you than your jugular vein, right? Closer to you than your jugular vein. That's how close you will feel to your mother if you can keep your focus on that consciousness. And if you bring that to her, her transition out of this life will be graceful, peaceful, or her transition into healing will be graceful and peaceful, because she will know that she is more than the conditions of her body. And that may even cause healing in the body that you don't anticipate, because sometimes the body is responding to programming of what we think the body is versus the magnificence of seeing it fully as a perfected creation of God.
Thank you so much.
God bless you. Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to the other folks who are further ahead in line. Wanted to give somebody new an opportunity to share. I have a couple of quick announcements, I think, and they're going to be posted in the chat of there's a couple fundraisers I wanted you to know about. The first fundraiser is for MSIA and being done by my dear friend Michael Hayes. So I'll post that one in the chat. So if you haven't registered for it, could be fun, raising money for a good cause, obviously, MSIA. And thank you to Michael and Alicia for donating your time to support this work. God bless you. Thank you. The other one is a fundraiser for another aspect of JR's work, which is the Best of Super 2. It is a multi-day sharing process with myself, with John Morton, and with Michael Hayes, or John Morton, Michael Hayes, and myself, which is usually the priority most people who sign up for it think of it as. But there's still some basically live spots available where you can ask questions, and all proceeds are going to support another nonprofit that JR helped found that does some amazing work on the planet. So those are just two opportunities. If you dig this type of sharing, those are both kind of that, probably going to be that vibe, that type of sharing. If not, obviously you can keep coming to this thing, but this is a great way to support John Rogers' work and the work that we do if you are interested. But yeah. All right. Love you all. Thank you. God bless you. I love you. Peace be still.
Love you, definitely.